cutting-edge commentary by contributors of the financial blog Hedge, readers have been treated to recurring guest posts by fellow members. One of the early contributors is a member known as Cognitive Dissonance. What sets his musings apart is his deep philosophical discussion, lifting us above the mainstream financial and officialdom commentary and evoking personal introspection and contemplation. I, for one, enjoyed his writings after his first contribution to Hedge in 2009, feeling that he was a catalyst for the average human making sense of a rapidly changing reality. Earlier this year, Mr. and Mrs. Cog launched their own website with a member forum, 2iceflows.com. They describe it as follows. Two ice flows is the term we use to describe the conflict or cognitive dissonance we experience while trying to live, work, play, and grow in two different realities at the same time. This website seeks to explore the philosophy and application of acknowledging these conflicts while we attempt to survive the control system matrix and thrive and grow while we create our personal reality. I am so delighted for us to have the opportunity to learn more about cognitive dissonance and the motivation for creating two ice flows. We will explore these topics in further detail as we speak directly with the man known as Cognitive Dissonance in my conversation with Cog. Hello, Cog. Welcome to Time Monk Radio. How is life at 3,000 feet?
It's snowing right now, again.
It's been a brutal winter.
Yeah, it's been interesting. We are foreigners to this area. There's the locals, which are on the mountain, and we recently moved here. Essentially, we moved in last June, and I suspect most of the locals were expecting us to literally head for the lower lands when the first real snow started, and we've sort of hung in there. And I think they've been surprised and delighted to see that we are sincere in our efforts to stay.
Well, I think the whole country has been experiencing such a brutal winter, and I know here we live in the South as well, and we are ready for spring and got our peas in the ground finally and ready to see some green.
You're planting already?
We are. We just planted our sugar snap peas.
I'm jealous.
And we're ready for it too, ready to get the whole garden in. The reason that I wanted to have you on Time Monk Radio is I've been fascinated with your writings through Hedge and absolutely delighted even more so with the website Two Ice Flows. And I wanted to go into a conversation with you and let's explore a little bit who is cognitive dissonance and the journey that led to this alter persona.
Wow, that's a big question. Obviously, cognitive dissonance is an alter ego of mine. When I guess I discovered Hedge a couple of months after Hedge came onto the scene. It was at their old blogspot location, and I found it, and I found it fascinating because here was a group of people, including obviously Tyler, the main character, so to speak, of Hedge, speaking what I found to be financial truth. My background is as a financial planner, stockbroker, and I was fascinated. Here was truth out in the open. I mean, there were opinions and there's truth, but you weren't finding this in mainstream media. And so I lurked, I guess is the term. I didn't really comment, though at that time you could comment without an actual avatar. You could be just anonymous. And after a couple of months, I decided to pull up my britches and create an avatar and actually be someone other than just another anonymous. And that's where it began. I specifically, I gave it a lot of thought, almost a week's time before I decided to, on the moniker of cognitive dissonance. I actually, it's a bigger picture here because this is, how do I want to say this? I was still awakening and still am, but I was was earlier in my waking process. And at that time I was listening a lot to Neil Kramer. I still am again, but back then he was a phenomenon in my eyes. And I can't remember if I was reading one of his articles or if I was listening to one of his articles, because soon after he released a audio recording of himself reading his articles. But anyway, he was talking about the phenomenon of people starting to wake and then they start running around, screaming their heads off and making fools of themselves and everybody else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, do you remember that article?
I do.
Yeah. Well, in it, he said something profound. He said basically, don't speak unless you have something to say, um, and be careful with what you're saying. And I thought about that, and I said, okay, well, if I'm going to speak, then I should speak from my heart, and I should use it in a manner that I can teach myself. So I came up with cognitive dissonance, and I came up with a name because I wanted it may sound interesting or odd, but I wanted something that would be a constant irritant, not a finger in the wound, but just something to when someone sees my avatar and hears me speak, that they would pay attention. And so I chose that and started speaking in the comments section. And even though I had been in the field, the financial field, for almost 20 years, I felt like a newbie. These people were hardcore traders. Back then, Zero Hedge was an entirely different place than it is now.
Right.
You may remember that. It's
I do.
These were traders. These were people who were angry with the system, um, and they were talking about specifics, very, very hardcore specifics as of what was going on. Anyway, back to the creation. What I was really looking for was I wanted to speak. I wanted to speak about what I was discovering and what I was thinking about, but I was frightened of it. I didn't want to. I wanted to create more than just an alter ego. I wanted to create a mentor. I wanted to create a voice by which I could speak to myself with, that I could feel safe in doing so, if that makes any sense.
It does. That's very interesting.
Well, I had a tough childhood, and safety was important to me. And it's funny. I've been thinking about this interview and thinking about the creation of cognitive dissonance. It's actually has a longer lineage than what we're talking about. I mean, we as children we all create these make-believe safe places, and this was basically me creating a safe place through the voice of cognitive dissonance. I was able to speak to myself um, with a voice of reason and authority, so that I didn't feel like I was speaking just to empty air, but I was just talking to myself, and it gave me some confidence to start doing this.
And what was your impetus for going public with this alter persona ultimately in a financial blog versus just immediately out the door starting your own blog? Was it just safer there because you had that financial background?
Well, one thing led to another. I created the alter ego. We started commenting. I always wanted to take the higher road, so my voice was different, not just in the fact that the name was different, but the voice was different. A couple of months after I created Cognitive Dissonance, I got this email from Tyler Durden, who is the man at Zero Hedge, and he was asking me, "Do you want to be a contributor?" I thought it was a joke initially. I said, "What?" I mean, seriously, why would anybody want me? Um, and I was sort of like typed back. I responded by saying, "Who is this?"
That was a big question, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mom, is that you?
That's funny.
Yeah, but he came back, and I guess there was no real way of confirming it was he. And he asked if I wanted to do it again, and I said, "That's pretty interesting. What are the rules? What's the regulations? What can I speak about?" And at that time, obviously there was a delay in the communication, so I could think about it a little bit. And I basically said to him, "I'm not going to speak about financial matters. You can see what I'm talking about in the comment section. Will that be okay?" Big question mark. And basically, he said, "Yeah, you talk about whatever you want." And I said, "Well, what are the rules?" He said, "There are no rules. And you contributors are giving direct access to the website. There is no, you send it in and it gets buffered or edited or anything. I literally click a button here and I can create content and bang, it's there. I save it and it's on Zero Hedge. There is nothing. There's no filtering at all. And I basically said, well, can I speak about these things, and is there anything that I shouldn't be speaking about? And I said, ultimately, will I know if I'm doing the right or not? And he says, the audience will tell you when you're doing something wrong. They'll be screaming at you. They'll be, or they'll be ignoring you, one or the other, or both.
I
And
don't know which would be worse, actually.
well, they did
Maybe the
both.
ignoring.
They actually did both. It was strange. I mean, the first few times, the first few articles, people were coming on and just screaming at me, and uh, to the point where at one point I was in near tears. It was just, oh my heavens, what did I do? What insanity ever thought gave me the idea that I could do this? And but there were other people that were saying, oh my God, you're speaking about something that nobody ever talks about. Continue, please. And so actually, Tyler was correct. People would be either screaming at me or ignoring me because they did both. But for some reason, Tyler kept me on. And this was a huge, Tyler was taking a big chance by allowing me my voice because I rarely, if ever, do I talk about finances on a extremely financial blog. I mean, this is crazy.
To that, does he handpick all the contributors there? Does he invite them?
Um, uh, I have to assume so.
Okay,
Um,
that's really interesting that given that it is such a hardcore financial blog, and I remember those days very well because I lurked there for a long time, that he invited you to speak of topics that weren't financial. That's very interesting.
It's very interesting. It was a huge risk on his part. I think it still is, to be perfectly honest. There is no interaction. Mrs. Cog told me once we got together that she always saw this image of all the contributors in the back coffee room having, crullers and tea and whatnot, talking to each other. But there is no contact between us contributors. There's none other than whatever we initiate ourselves. There is absolutely none. There's no crosstalk. I have a relationship with George Washington and of course Bonsai, and somewhat of a relationship with a few other contributors who are no longer here. Well, actually, there's one that's still around. They've gone through a number of them that no longer post. I don't know why. There's no announcement. There's no bulletin board back in that fictitious coffee room that says this is the state of the community.
Yeah, and I've wondered about that myself because and even the commenters that there's some that I really like to follow, and every time they'd comment, I'd read, every bit of it. And, there's some long-term people that have been there, and all of a sudden they just don't post anymore. And it's like, oh, wonder what happened to them. And
Mm.
it's interesting sight, and I'm glad that he did take a chance on you because I remember reading your first article there and being like, wow, this is not financial, and this is so Neil Kramer-esque and so philosophical that I wanted to learn more and look to hear more from you.
Yeah, it was the right place at the right time. This is why when some people will bash Tyler Durden, I say no. It doesn't matter. See, it doesn't matter what zero hedge is. It doesn't matter what you perceive zero hedge is. It's what you make of it that counts, and that's all that matters. For people who want to say this or that about zero hedge, it's silly, really. But obviously, zero hedge is populated by some angry people, and we shouldn't listen to just that anger and assume that everybody else is that way. One of the things that really kept me going in the early 6 months or so when I was being battered in the comment section. And see, I set myself up for this battering because I spend a lot of time in the comment section underneath my articles.
Hmm.
Most contributors don't do that. They'll just put an article out and then they're gone, and everybody yells and screams at each other or at the author.
Yes.
I I find the best conversations are in the comment section under my articles. I always learn much more from these comments, even the ones that are angry, than I ever learned talking to myself and writing the article itself. So
I would agree. There's a lot of insight into the comments, or into the articles through the comments. And a lot of times when I don't understand something that's in the article because I'm not a trader or deep in the financial bowels of the economy, although I have some understanding, but not to that level. I can learn a lot in the comments. And
Hmm.
so it's nice that you go in and you comment on your own articles and answer questions and make sense if there's a misunderstanding. I do like that.
Yeah, I um I thought long and hard about doing it and what I would accomplish, but after trying it under the first article, I realized that as long as I can keep my ego in check, that I can learn so much more there and in talking to people and exchanging. It blows me away sometimes how they'll take something that I've written about and they'll come back. Four different commenters will come back from four different perspectives, and I'm going, wow, I didn't even consider that. Where did that come from? Wow. Oftentimes when I'm reading comments and responding, I start firing and I say, oh, that's an article, that's an article. And so most of my inspiration comes from the comments under the prior article. So it's pretty neat. The thing I wanted to finish there was the I every now and then I would put my email address because someone said they wanted to talk to me, so I would put my email address in the comment, and my email box would fill up with people who would be telling me that they don't comment, that it's a brutal environment and they don't want to join that, but they did want to talk to me, and some of the stories I could tell you are just amazing of the people that talk to me in my email and not in the comment section. But I would suspect 9/10 of the people who read Zero Hedge never, ever comment in the comment section. That's not, in other words, what you're reading in the comment section, the attitudes, the perspective, the anger, the frustration, is not representative of what most of the people reading Zero Hedge bring to the table. And that was the impetus for eventually for the Two Ice Flows website. I wanted a place where those people could go to, the ones that didn't feel they had a voice but wanted to speak, and that's why we created Two Ice Flows. One of the reasons, at least.
Well, it's a beautiful website with fantastic graphics, and I understand that Mrs. Cog had a heavy hand in that, and I'd like to get to that a little bit more as well.
Sure.
Um, and but I wanted to ask you a quick question on, is COG who you are and who you strive to be as you balance both worlds? And are you able to be COG out in the mainstream, standing in line at the grocery store, maybe at a company function or wherever you are, where you're with the typical mainstream humans? Are you able to be COG, or are you the
Me.
other persona? Yes.
Yeah. Probably a mixture. Um, the I love interacting with people. Everybody wants to talk if they feel that they're being listened to, or I should say most. The people that aren't talking are afraid to talk, even though they may not want to admit it. If I'm in a grocery store line, if I'm not talking to the person behind me, I'm talking to the person in front of me. And when I get up to the cashier, I'm talking to the cashier. It doesn't matter. Everybody's there to be met and to talk to, and you can get into some amazing conversations. And I seem to have some effect on people. I used to think it was just something that was, I don't know, strange, I guess is the only word, but I'll start talking to people, and some people they'll just start opening up to me and telling me. I mean, I'm the confessional for crying out loud. I cannot believe some of the things people tell me. Did you check with mom? You're not supposed to say that in the public.
That's funny.
Yeah, yeah, but people, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the sense in me that it's safe to talk, or if it's just my approach. Because I'll just turn around and start talking to someone as if I've known them for 5 years. It's an implied consent that it's okay to talk because I just start talking, and either what are they going to do? Are you going to give up your space in the line?
Right.
It's fine. Go to the back of the line and ignore the crazy guy up there. But people respond, and once I think they must sense my sincerity or just my openness, because it's rare that I get a person who just looks at me like go away. At the very least, they'll engage a little bit, and then pick up the phone and start faking a call or something. I'm not sure.
I'm sitting here
But
thinking, I would love to have you in line behind me at the grocery store. That would be a wonderful conversation.
well, in this world of instant communication, it's surprised how many people are starved for conversation.
I would agree.
The fact that we can connect doesn't mean that we're actually connecting. It just means, it's like walking down the street of New York City and you have a 100,000 people running up and down the street and nobody's interacting. It's now I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what I'm trying to say, other than the fact that it seems that people are willing to respond because I get them to respond, and what it is or why it happens, I don't know. But I think I answered your question.
Well, I think I could venture a guess there. They're picking up on something, some kind of energy that, like you said, is safe, or maybe something they've been pondering, or somebody that can connect the pieces to the puzzle for them. And I run into people like that in public, and you just sense it about they're like, ooh, this person's interesting and fascinating, and they have something to say, and I want to hear it. I need to hear it, and maybe I'm supposed to hear it.
It's around here, up here on the mountain. There's a different variety of people. They're a bit more aloof, a little bit more closed. Um, in some ways, in other ways, they're much more open and welcome to strangers than somebody in Northern Virginia, let's say. Um, but I laugh sometimes. I'll be talking to somebody and I'll be watching their eyes and their body language as I'm talking to them, and a stranger, and I can't help sometimes but laugh, which then I'm certain that they think I'm just crazy, because I'll think to myself, this person must think I'm some crazy Yankee down here or something. But they
That's
wind up laughing, and we wind up having a conversation, and you touch another life, and you both walk away with a smile, either on the face or in the mind, and hopefully both. It keeps me going. I do need to get out. I mean, we're up here on a back road, on a dirt road, off of a dirt road, off of a back road. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and I tell Mrs. Cog every now and then, I got to get back. I got to go talk to somebody other than you, hon. I love you, but I got to go talk to somebody else. I got to get out of here.
no, I completely understand.
Yeah. So I can be. See, remember, you have to understand where I was many years ago, many decades ago. As I said, I had a rough childhood, and the last thing I would do is exactly what I'm doing now. I would not interact. I was afraid of being assaulted in one way or another. So one of the ways that I was able to, one of the reasons that I create alternative egos or alter egos is simply to give myself a voice. See, when I created Cog, not only did I create something, but I empowered my voice. There's a difference there. I can create an alter ego, but if I don't empower it to speak for myself, then it is just another image, it's just another avatar. But by empowering it, it's a safe place where you can speak without having to feel that you're being judged. And this may all be a psychological trick upon myself to get myself to speak. And so what if it is? What's the big deal? Just do what you need to do to explore where you need to go, and to experience the pain that you don't want to experience.
Wow, so cognitive dissonance has been therapeutic and healing as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So I could not, I couldn't write a lick before I created cognitive dissonance. I look at some of my early writings, and I figure I may have graduated from fifth grade English, but it was just, but when I'm talking to myself, what I'm doing is I'm explaining, cognitive dissonance is explaining to me, the human, what cognitive dissonance is thinking, which of course is what I'm thinking. So it's a teaching process. I'm trying to break it down into a simple, understandable way for me to understand something. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm readable, is that because I'm not trying to use heavy words or big words, or to lecture somebody. I'm just talking to myself. This is just some Looney Tune talking to himself on top of the mountain, which is fine.
Wow, that's really interesting how through this persona that you've been able to create such brilliant pieces of writing and thought and be able to put them out so coherently um, to people that really gets them thinking. I really truly think that is, and that you are a catalyst for people really examining their beliefs and their thoughts and their realities. And although some of it may be painful, it really helps one grow.
Yeah. I think what touches some people is my vulnerability. I put myself out there regularly. I speak in terms of myself. I say I. Occasionally, I will speak and use the word we. Rarely will I use the word you. I hate being lectured to, and I suspect most other people are the same way. They don't like to be lectured. And by speaking in the first person, by saying I or myself or me, it allows somebody to it allows the reader to try on, to practice that emotion or that openness or that thought without being threatened by it, because it's not their emotion, it's cognitive dissonance emotions that I'm speaking about, or it's where I'm exploring somewhere that they wanted to. So it gives them permission to feel, to see, to look, to experience without the danger of not being able to go back. And it, it's permission. I'm empowering them to do exactly what I've empowered cognitive dissonance to do with me. And I think people sense that. And if you read the comments, you'll find some people really get angry. I mean, they're triggered, and you know that I've touched something. When people do that, I mean, when they come out screaming, you know that cognitive dissonance has touched something in them that has elicited that response. I mean, what else? What other reason for that anger? Usually, it's very incoherent as well.
Absolutely. I find that when something is triggering me or I'm with others that are triggered, that we hold up mirrors for each other and we often see ourselves in them, and it does evoke a range of emotions that maybe we aren't ready for or we hadn't fully examined, and they bubble up, and it forces us to look at our own anger or our defensiveness.
Yes, and that was the reason I created a cognitive dissonance to allow myself to experience these things, but always give myself a way back to back out. No, that's not me. That's cognitive dissonance. And again, it's a
Yep.
mental game, but you know what? It doesn't matter as long as a tool is simply a tool. It's how you use it as to whether you're going to accomplish something or you're going to smash your finger. The tool is not responsible for any damage done or any creation, any beautiful creation done either. It's simply the tool. You are it's the hand and the mind behind it that empowers it. And I think one of the things that I've gained the most pleasure from with cognitive dissonance is some of the people who were screaming at me or I guess it's been almost 5 years now, have become, they're not loyalists, they're not fans, but they understand now that that they're not angry with me anymore. They can converse with me. We can have differences of opinion, and they're not threatened by me. And that's very gratifying because these are the people who've done the most work. It's not the ones who immediately come to me in the comment section and say, "Oh, I agree with you, Cog." It's the ones that were screaming at me 3 years ago and now are talking to me that they've done the most work.
That's something else that yeah, I had a friend say to me one time that he tries to meet people where they are, and that's always rattled around in my brain and in my heart. And I follow that, and it sounds like that's what you do as well. You meet people where they are, and you give them a chance to do their work, and they take the opportunity to do their work, and then you're able to meet in a different place.
Yeah, yeah, and it works both ways. Watching someone else grow, feel the pain, do the hard work, and then come back. It empowers me back again. It says, "Oh, look, this is working. I can do this too." Uh, the image, I have no idea. Everybody who reads me has a different image. Let's use air quotes around image. Has an image of what cognitive dissonance is and who cognitive dissonance is. These, it's all different with people. Everybody has a different approach to what I'm reading or what they're reading, excuse me. And for you can see there's long times people here that have been commenting for 3 or 4 years, and you can see the changes in these people. It's absolutely amazing.
I've watched some of those changes because I followed your work for so long and read the comments, and I can see a lot of the long term individuals that post there, I can see the changes. I can see the changes in myself as I think about things that are presented in a different manner. And it's been quite a journey.
It has been. It's been educational for me. I don't want people to think that I'm not growing because I am. This is a work in progress. It will always be a work in progress. I try to speak because I'm speaking through cognitive dissonance's voice. I tend to speak. Um, I'm not an answer person. I'm a better question person. That's what I like to think of I am. But I will speak with authority. I will speak in the sense of from I don't want to say from a Mount Olympus type of authority, but simply saying this is how I feel, this is what I'm coming to, and it doesn't ring as arrogant because I'm always speaking in terms of myself. I'm saying I, me, occasionally we, and I always point the finger back at myself and say I'm guilty of this myself. This is what I do. I still struggle with this. And authorities, people who supposedly speak or lecture other people, they will not admit their own errors. God forbid they would actually admit that they're human. And I admit it on a daily basis. I make mistakes. I still make mistakes. I still struggle with this. This is I just said it today in the comment section, and I wish I would. Wish I would listen to my own prodding more often. And people respect that. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of growing maturity if you can admit that you just still are not perfect. We're not perfect. We never will be, but it's a growing process. And as people see that cognitive dissonance still struggles with issues, even though he speaks in the voice that he does, I think again it empowers them to continue to try just a little bit. One of my favorite sayings is, "How do you eat an elephant?" Well, one bite at a time.
Right.
It's
Yes.
and so it's not hopeless simply because you still have 99.9% of the elephant in front of you because all you got to manage is this one bite right in front of your mouth right now. Just chew on it and the next one will be there when you're ready. And if you don't touch it for another 2 months, that's okay. You took the first bite. You'll get to the second one. And so cognitive dissonance is encouraging people um, to continue to chew, to bite, to take as much as they think they can, no more, no less, just keep on doing it. And that's very empowering in a society that teaches us that you're either a winner or a loser, and it's a black and white situation. I'm telling everybody there's a million shades of gray, and you're okay.
Yes, absolutely. And we're going to get to that because I'd like to go to that a little bit. But first, I'd like to ask you a little bit about Two Ice Flows. And you've already discussed your impetus for going public. And I like Welcome to the Insane Asylum and how nice the website is and the graphics, and um, it's comfortable there. And
That
Mrs.
is,
Cog has done a
yeah,
beautiful job.
she has. Um, she just jumped into it. I think she's been cheerleading me. I think she knew I was going to do this before I did. I mean, I've always had in the back of my mind that I'd like to create something like this. We came to a point in our lives, we were changing a lot of things, and we decided to do this. And I told her some of the things that I wanted to see. I wanted a safe place for people who wanted to comment. It was first and foremost in my mind. I wanted to be able to have a safe place where nobody's going to be screaming at you, where you can come out and talk about what you want to talk about and not be judged and not be yelled at. But two, I wanted, I, as Mrs. Cog would say, a pretty place, but I wanted a news magazine type of format where there's images and text. And by the way, I have to give credit to William Bonsai Seven for my adopting of the images. I was earlier on at Zero Hedge. If for people who don't know, William Bonsai Seven is a contributor at Zero Hedge, and he is a unique personality. He does the photoshopped images and almost exclusively that. We started a conversation very early. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say we love Bonsai's
Uh,
contributions to Zero Hedge, and there's many times that, I'll be falling asleep and my husband will be, I can hear him laughing, and I'm like, "What's so funny?" He's like, "Bonsai."
oh, he is so unique. He is a genius. I've been blessed with having private email conversations with him, and we've gotten to know each other a bit. And every time when you see a bonsai, you actually get to see his mind if you look a little deeper and not just at the image itself, because it's fascinating watching the connections he makes. But anyway, I collaborated him relatively early. He was actually in the comment section. Here's another success story. He was actually in the comment section of Zero Hedge, leaving links to his images. He had just started, I think, a year or so before. And I started clicking on those images. At that time, I was a contributor. I was a relatively new contributor. And I started clicking on it, and I could see the genius. Just then, it was just so obvious. And so I started posting because as a contributor, you can post images in the comment section as well as in your own articles. So I started posting them. Within 2 weeks, Tyler communicated with Bonsai asking him if he would like to become a contributor. Uh, in no way did I, discover Bonsai. He was there. Again, I just like to think I was the catalyst. I was able to have the opportunity to put some of his images up, and then bang, he just exploded onto the scene, and he is still exploding onto the scene. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I think it was like 6 months later, we decided to collaborate. I would write the article and he would contribute the images, and I put it together, and we did it a couple of times. And then he's just made this one suggestion. He says, look, why don't you try to find your own images? And uh, I said, yeah, why not? And I tried it, and it took sometimes. I'll tell you what. Sometimes it takes me hours to find the right images that go with these articles. But I realized the power of attacking more than just one sense. The power of these images sometimes exceeds the power of the text.
Hmm.
And I owe that to Bonsai because he was the one that turned me on. So when we were creating this website, it was important that we had a format that would allow us to put high quality images up. And Mrs. Cog just then went with that idea and she's before this, she had created a few of her own blogs for her own personal sites, but this was 3 levels beyond anything that she had ever tried. And she just jumped into it and started gnawing on that bone. And I think it was 2 months of creation by both of us before we finally brought it out. But she is the genius behind this website as far as what you see on a daily basis. She she has conversations with the host. We have it hosted, and we'll have an issue or something, and she'll get on the phone and she'll be talking to the host about how we can work through an issue, and they'll be looking at the website and they'll say, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. And of course we can, because we are, it's working. uh, there's things called plugins, which are ready-made programs made by third parties, which you can plug into your website to create this or do that or whatever. And that the host is saying, well, maybe you should have 5 or 6. And I think last count we had 40 some,
Oh
which they all
gosh.
tell her, yes, which they all tell her it's impossible. And of course it isn't. She's doing it. But occasionally you do have some conflicts. Anybody who's ever created a website understands what a conflict is. And so we work through it. But anyway, her genius, she is a genius when it comes to this. So I owe her all the credit for that.
Well, it certainly sounds like Mr. and Mrs. Cog are a fabulous team, and it's a very pretty website. I have to
Hmm.
say I admire all the graphics, and it's just so clean and crisp, and like you said, a lot of the pictures really speak and enhance the text.
It's intentional. We
It's
tried
working.
to, yeah, it is. And she'll be very pleased to hear you use the word pretty because, well, I like to say that anything that's designed well is intrinsically pretty. She starts everything off by making sure it's pretty. If it's going to be designed in at the very beginning, and she's done a wonderful job. And you would not believe the amount of thought that goes into creating something like this. It's
I can
right
only
down to where do you
imagine.
put this. Yeah,
Yes, I
it's
can
her
only
website.
imagine that.
I just borrow it to put my articles on. It is her place.
She just lets you share the space the beautiful, pretty space that she's created.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
nice.
well, I'm a contributor to my own website. And by the way, she has her own corner. This was something that was designed in originally. It's called Mrs. Cog's Corner. She has interests that are different, complementary, but different from mine. And so there is a whole section on alternative medicine, alternative living, wellness and health, inspiration, food, gluten-free, and her own link library, and more to come. It's the great thing about this is it's our palette. We can do whatever we want. There's no restrictions. And again, it will be our membership that tells us whether we're succeeding or failing.
Well, she's a gal after my own heart because I have visited her corner many times, and so many of those topics are the same interests that I have, and I love being able to read her perspective and pick up bits and pieces of research that I haven't discovered yet. So kudos to both of you.
Well, you're going to need to eventually interview her because if there's ever a walking, talking cognitive dissonance, it was Mrs. Cog, because the world that she was living in just a few short years ago and the world that she's in now are diametrically opposed. This is not the same person. And how she got there and the process that she followed and still follows to this day is fascinating. I don't know if I would have the courage that she has exhibited to make the changes psychologically, mentally, emotionally, physically that she has over the past 3 or 4 years to get to where she is now. I don't know if I could do that myself. I'm amazed sometimes.
Well, we would love to have her on, maybe do another roundtable and invite Mrs. Cog, and because she has some really interesting things to say, and I'm sure our listening audience would really enjoy that as well.
Yeah, she's just as good a writer as I am. She just doesn't quite have the confidence yet to recognize that. But I'm encouraging her. She's actually now creating original content for the website.
Fantastic. That's good to hear.
Hmm.
And we will definitely keep her in mind. So when you went to name the website Two Ice Flows, which I like that, and what is the meaning of that to you, and maybe for others that don't understand what that means, and also your perception of the two different realities? Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, if you take the idea of cognitive dissonance, it is an irritation. It's friction between realities, a one perceived and a one real, or who even knows what real is. But one of the things that we all deal with is our growing awakening and how we integrate that into the insanity that we live in. I mean, what do you do when you wake up one morning in the insane asylum and you have to cope? You have to cope. Um, what do you do when you don't even quite know what reality is anymore? You have to throw everything that you thought you knew outside the door or out the window. How do you cope? And this is where a lot of the tension and anger and frustration and fear, this is where it is. If you talk to people that are awakening, this is where their tension is. And so, but no one's really talking about it. They're talking about either the old reality, the Ponzi, whatever you want to call it, the insanity, or they're talking about the awakening. But they're really not talking about how do we live in both these worlds and be settled, be centered. And I mean, they're talking about it, but they're not devoting time to it. They're more interested in talking about what they're learning or how it's conflicting with the old, but I need to be able to live in it. I need to be able to live in both worlds at the same time. And so I'm not even sure what the genesis was for the actual name Two Ice Flows, which is FLOES, and not FLOWS. It's I can't remember what the genesis was, but the bottom line is that a glacier flows down the valley, it flows off the mountain, and at times you'll see where the ice will come in and join the main glacier from one valley, and then it will cut off into another valley. And basically, that's what we're doing for most people who are still firmly plugged in into the insanity. They don't even know there's two ice flows. All they know is that there is just one. For people who are awakening, they're starting to recognize that there are two worlds or more, and that they're moving and sometimes at different speeds and at different rates and at different realities. And how do you cope with that? So we decided to create a place and talk about it.
Fantastic. And, I know for me, when I started to awaken to this world isn't quite what I've been told it is. It was nice to have the Neil Kramers of the world and
Hmm.
those types of things to be able to measure your feelings against what they were saying and their perspective and have things make sense. So for those of us that are still on that path of figuring it all out, it's nice to have two ice flows.
Yeah, I don't see the problem I had was that I don't have the Neil Kramer, and I cannot speak enough about Neil Kramer, a genius right there, not just in his thoughts and his teachings, but his delivery. It's just amazing. I wish I had 1/10 of his talent, but he's an educated man in the sense that he spent years diving deep into this and really researching it. And then there was Paul Levy, who I had extensive conversations with in 2009, 2008 and 2009. And he was instrumental in helping me um, basically plant my feet in both the worlds and understand that I can live this way, that there is a way of coping. Because he went through a similar experience himself. He had an awakening several decades ago, and at one point I know he talks about this now, and actually in one of his books, how he was hospitalized because of the epiphanies that he was experiencing. So these people are both Paul and Kramer are well educated, and they have seriously studied um, other masters, other experts. I hate the word experts, but other people who have deeply delved into these areas. I have none of that background. None. I am not an educated man in that respect. I purposely stay away from these from so-called experts because I don't want to be polluted with their thinking. I just want to go where the path takes me. So I didn't feel that I had the I don't know, the authority. I'm not sure what word I'm looking for here, but I just didn't think that I was on the same par with these other individuals and others that I don't mention or haven't mentioned now. So this was one of the reasons why we recreated Two Ice Flows in such a unique manner, because my thinking does not come from any other particular sources. It comes from my own source. I like to say to people, I have not an original thought. None of my thoughts are original. Millions of people have come before me and done thinking much deeper than I have. What I do have is an original construction of the words, the way I convey it, my thinking, that is original. And so we created Two Ice Flows to try to demonstrate that, or at least to showcase it.
So when you say welcome to the insane asylum and you say, that you're both staff and patient of the insane asylum, let's explore that a little bit. How do you mean that?
Well, God, where would I begin on that one?
That's a big question. I know.
Yeah, we we are we like to believe that it is they, them, and those that are confining, constricting, controlling us. This is what we want to believe. It is a comforting belief. It is a comforting place to be because then we're not responsible and we can be victims. And if we're victims, we're not responsible. It's somebody else that's making us do these things. But of course, the reality is that we are constraining ourselves. We are confining ourselves. We are creating our own cages. They are just simply giving us the tools, the feedback, the affirmation, the manipulation, so to speak, to confirm what we already want to believe, that we've been conditioned to believe. It sounds like an insane asylum to me, but because we are creating the actual cage which we live in, we are essentially both the inmates and the guards. We are guarding ourselves. We are making sure that our walls are nice and tall and that they cannot be scaled. We're staying right where we're told to stay. This is that slave mentality that I talk about all the time. We don't think of ourselves as slaves because we have comforting illusions about free choice and this and that. I mean, when the rat is in the maze and they come to a fork in the road, that rat thinks it has a choice. I can go left or I can go right. Well, yeah, but when that's the only two choices that you're allowing yourself to perceive, then what is it? What is choice here? You know, and so that's what I mean by inmates and guards. This is our insane asylum. Our leaders are not being parachuted in by aliens, at least not that I know of. It's a very real possibility, but until someone proves it to me, will continue to think that it is ourselves that are creating this insanity.
Yeah, that could be an entirely new conversation that I won't go into here, maybe another time. But going further, I had a really interesting conversation with a good friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the Matrix and the cliche of being offered the choice of a red or a blue pill. And he proposed the question to me that, we always think that there may be only two choices. And I wanted to know your thoughts on that. And my ultimate question for you and for us to explore here is one's journey controlled and contrived regardless of swallowing the red pill or the blue pill? And are there not actually many choices, such as a blending of the two, a purple pill, or as my husband calls it, the everlasting gobstopper, that there's so many choices and different paths to follow? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the all paths have an initial choice. Do I go left or right? Do I go forward or back? So in my view, the blue and the red pill is that initial choice. But once you start down a path, I mean, just because you choose to stay asleep does not mean you won't have another opportunity to wake up. So unlike in the Matrix where they say you're either awake or you're asleep, you either recognize what is going on or you don't. And as if to say that once that choice has been made, there's never going back. And they illustrate that. I forget the character who's eating the steak saying, "I want to be plugged back in. I want to be a movie star, an actor." I forget the character. I have that image in my head. In reality, there are 7 billion choices, and there are 7 billion choices every second. And so, really, I don't believe Mrs. Cog and I have these discussions all the time. Do we approach it with linear thinking, on, off, yes, no, right, wrong, which is how we stay confined, by giving ourselves limits, by saying it's only this or that? Or do we recognize that once we take a path, there are still many choices to be made, and there is really no wrong choices to be made, but there may be some backtracking. There may be, you know, who says you can't learn from making the wrong choice? I personally, I learn all the time from making bad choices or bad decisions. I learn much more from my mistakes than I do from my successes. So, to answer your question, I think it's a false dichotomy by just saying there's a red pill or a blue pill. We use those images to help convey a message, or it's a commonly understood example, so we may grab it and pull it out. But I always try to get people to understand that it's more than just a yes or no. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Well, to follow up with that, and the red pill, blue pill, one is awake and one is, still, deeply plugged into the matrix. And I guess the perception is, at least from many people that I speak with, is that when one is still plugged into the matrix, that we're very much controlled and our reality is contrived. But what about the instance of unplugging from the matrix? Is it possible that that enlightenment or awareness or journey to such may also be controlled as well?
yeah, you know what? It could be. It very well could be. And you know what else? So what? Does it really matter? Um, it's what I make of it. It's the journey that I take. Do I feel I'm growing? Do I feel I'm going forward, or at least I'm not going backwards? Is my head above water? Am I happy? Am I centered? Those are the real important questions, not whether we're being led by the nose one more time. Um, Ultimately, we have to decide what is our purpose here. And I can't tell you what it is, but I can tell you what I feel my purpose is, and that is to heal from the damages that I sustained as a child and as a young adult. Hell, right up until 5 or 10 years ago, I was continuing to damage myself as well as be damaged by others. So my purpose is to heal, and anything that can get me further down the road that can to help me heal is the right thing in my mind, and all other questions are immaterial as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to be chasing answers because then it just it 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 blinds me from better questions.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah,
That's a good answer. Yes.
I don't. That's why I say I don't have the answers. I don't have the answers. I may have a few that work for me, but I do not have the answers. What I like to think I do, and this may be my ego, is that I like to think that I have some better questions. And you will find in a lot of my writing that I'll probably ask more questions than I will give you answers.
Yes, I understand. I ask more questions than I have answers as well.
Yeah,
And
and what's
that's been fun. It's been fun
yeah,
to figure it
and
out.
what's wrong with that? What's wrong? See, our society teaches us that there is always an answer, that there is a definite end point, and that's a lie. That's a lie that keeps us blind. It enables us to stay blind ourselves. I don't want to be a victim here. This is not being done to me. I can open my eyes at any time. This is one of the things that really infuriates people when I write about it. I say, we are responsible for this mess. And people say, no, no, it's this or that. Well, yeah, that might be the protagonist, but how many times did you get dinged in the head over the past 20 years that something was wrong with this picture? And the easy, softer way was to just ignore it and continue forward. You had plenty of opportunities to start opening your eyes. So did I. I was wide awake and completely asleep at the same time for 50 some years. And so if I'm going to point fingers elsewhere, I better point a few of them back at myself first.
Yes, absolutely. I share that sentiment. Cog, tell us where we can find your writings and point us to the direction of your website one more time.
Sure. I continue to write and will contribute to write on Zero Hedge for as long as Zero Hedge welcomes my contributions. So, of course, I can be found at zerohedge.com. My website is Two Ice Flows. It's all one word, Two Ice Flows. And as I said earlier, it's FLOES.com. And it's a very unique destination. I hope people come by and take a look at it. There's a lot of free content here, and we made sure that we had that someone could come and fill their beak and be there for weeks reading if that's what they want. All my old writings and most of my new writings are there free of any charge. We do have a premium membership. The annual membership is $50. We do this for a number of reasons. One is because um, we are putting our full-time efforts into this. It is literally a 7-day-a-week effort, and we need to be able to recoup some expenses out of this. But also, as I had said earlier, one of the primary reason, or one of the primary things that I wanted on this website was a safe place to be for forums. And we found there are many different ways to do this, as you well know. We can restrict people from coming in, but bottom line is it takes a lot of time and effort to monitor the forums, and we found that a relatively minor entry fee keeps most of the trolls and agents and disruptors out. They're not even going to spend the money to get in. And so the few that do slip in the back door, we can quickly show their way out. And so this is one of the reasons why. And I know a lot of people are going to say, why would I want to pay for a website when I can get everything free? And I absolutely agree. Why would you? Tell me why you would want to pay. But we feel that we've created a different value proposition with this website. It is very unique. And we hope that people come and join, take a look at least. And judging from how many people are clicking, this is new, this is different. People are excited.
Thank you. You are listening to my conversation with Cog at Time Monk Radio. Please join us for the second part. Todd, welcome back to Time Monk Radio. We're going to continue with the second part of our conversation.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be back.
Thank you. In one of your articles that you had written called The End of the Empire, and particularly in part two, Waking Zombie Nations, Psychology, Consciousness, and the Egoic Mind, there was a phrase that has stuck with me for quite a while, and it's what you quote, or I'm going to quote you, it's as if you're a screen door barely affected by the gust of wind passing through. And I really like that, and I like to apply it to my daily life. And I'd like to for you to describe and explore this further with our listeners, including the challenges to existing or just being in this manner, and how do you release ego's grip?
I don't know if you ever release it. Being a screen door, what you're doing is you're diminishing its impact without really understanding what the ego is. And God, if you start reading about the ego, it's amazing what you'll find out about or the different opinions you'll have about it. The bottom line is I know is that when I let ego get in front and start driving that bus, I wind up in ditches all over the place. So I need to recognize that it is there. If I fight it, if I force anything, if I try to oppose anything, all it's doing is using my force against me. I use the analogy of we've all been in those situations when we're children where one child's on one side of the door and the other child's on the other, and you stop pushing it. You both stop pushing on both sides of the door, and you get to a point where all you're doing is pushing against yourself. It's like going up against the wall and pushing against the wall. Only this time, when you let go, it's going to get slammed in the face. So rather than try to oppose the ego directly, because it's just going to fight me. It's going to find it's a master manipulator. It's the ego knows me better than I know myself, and so thus can trip me up everywhere. Is to basically not put up any resistance to it, to simply recognize that it is there, and I don't need to play its game, and just simply let it pass through me. Sort of like how I try to apply fear. I recognize what it is. I know that it is there. I cannot deny it. I cannot fight it, but I can simply not give it any resistance and let it just flow right through me. And that, thus, the screen door analogy of just let it go through. Give it no more importance than what you feel you should. The more importance you give something, the more importance it has upon you. And so that screen door is simply let it pass through. Not affect me unless I decide that I allow it to be. And this is part of that personal responsibility that I was talking about in my personal sovereignty series. It's all comes down to that. We take full responsibility for it. And being the screen door is taking responsibility for the fact that the ego is there, that the fear is there, that the force is there, and simply letting it pass through. It's my way of verbalizing being invisible to it. I've heard Neil Kramer speak about this same thing in a different manner.
I think it's a good daily practice, if not moment to moment practice, depending on what you're facing at the moment.
It is. It's something that we can use at any time that we choose to, under any circumstance. We can use it if we feel emotional about a situation. We can allow the emotion to control the situation, or we can acknowledge that there's emotion there, but it can be, we have to acknowledge that it's there, but we only give it as much import or as much emphasis as we choose to. It doesn't have to control us. It is there. We are emotional creatures. We can't deny it, but we can allow it just to flow through us. And oftentimes I believe the ego is using emotion to try to control us. And so it's going to have as much impact or as little impact as we decide. And again, that comes down to personal sovereignty. The buck stops here, you know.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm curious, has there been a difference to you practicing this philosophy depending on your location? You know, you're in a much rural area now versus being in a metropolitan area, and so you have time to just be where you are. Do you find a difference?
Maybe on the surface, but ultimately there is no geographic cure. You are with you at all times, and the demons are within. And so I don't care if I'm on the mountain or in the middle of New York City. The demons are there. If I'm wrestling with them, they are wherever I am physically. There is just no geographic cure. That's why it'll work, because you're ultimately battling yourself.
Wherever you go, there you are.
There you
Right.
exactly.
Yes.
See,
I
I told you I don't have any original thought, just original
yeah,
destruction.
yeah, I don't either, but all of it's in the collective consciousness waiting for us to pluck out what we need to learn and grow.
Exactly.
I'd like to move on a little bit to the nature and empire. And you had written an interesting article about kudzu and the actual physical battles with it on your property. And you compared it to the tentacles of the empire. And I thought it was very cleverly done. And it got me thinking about fence building, and you also had another article on that as well. And so my mind went the direction of Robert Frost's Mending Wall. And he is quoted in there saying, "Do good fences make good neighbors?" And so, as with kudzu, what fences has the empire introduced and propagated?
Mm. Um, wow. It's amazing how much thinking I've done about this kudzu. It applies everywhere, and it can apply everywhere simply because, as I like to say, I find inspiration wherever I look. Just to give some background for people who have not read the article, we bought this property. I had background living in a rural area when I was a child, but we haven't. Both Mrs. Cog and I have not lived in rural areas for all our adult lives. We bought the property in the middle of winter, so there was no big kudzu leaves to see, and quite frankly, I wasn't paying attention to the vines. I was looking at the spectacular views and the house when we bought it. So it was only this spring and summer where I realized that the property was pretty infested with kudzu. The general consensus thinking is it's you can't beat it, you can't fight it, so just leave it alone. And I thought that to be curious, considering some of the impossible things that we humans do on a daily basis. Why would we not uh, at least take a look at this more closely? And when I got into it and I started looking at the kudzu, apparently it had been here for 20 years, some huge vines out there. As I started cutting the kudzu, um, it got me thinking all kinds of areas. Obviously kudzu is alive. It's a plant. It's an invasive species, but it still is. It's an entity. It's a living entity, and yet it's choking the trees. It's killing the trees. There's so much standing dead out there. Or I've cut most of it down now, but so the life of one entity is living off the other. It's a parasite in many respects, um, and by doing this, it's actually the kudzu by living off another entity, it is going to kill itself eventually. I see it all over the woods where some trees have fallen and there's no other place where the kudzu can go. The kudzu has died, and it just got me thinking about what the government is doing, what the empire is doing, how it lives and feeds and grows off the host, which is we the people, and is killing itself by killing the people. And it's just and it was an interesting dichotomy for me because I had to make a choice here. Do I save the forest, or do I kill the kudzu to save the forest, but then take the life of the kudzu, or do I allow the kudzu to continue growing and eventually kill itself anyway? What right do I have to take that position anyway? I mean, who made me God?
Mm-hmm.
The I don't know. My thinking continuously evolves here as to do we oppose the empire's growth? We see it all the time in the comment section where people will say, well, if you don't oppose the federal government or the empire, then the empire will destroy you. Yeah, I understand that. But what right do we have? is it by me directly opposing the empire, I could shorten my life and the life of my loved ones. On the other hand, if I don't oppose the empire, that could shorten the life of myself and my loved ones. So, it, my instinct is to simply treat it as I would a screen door. My experience is that the only time I have a problem is when I put up resistance to it, and so. Um, But then again, there's another argument there. If you don't stop it here, it goes somewhere else. There is no easy answers, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and I really enjoyed that article. And I, I've I go back and forth in the questions to myself as well, and uh, it's a hard decision to make as far as from day to day or moment to moment, and I guess depending on what your passions are.
I chose to kill the kudzu. To answer that story, I chose to kill the kudzu. Uh, eh, you know, it, the bottom line was the trees were talking to me, and as soon as I cut the kudzu, the trees were happier. The kudzu were obviously unhappy, but I almost felt in them. Well, it depends. There were days when I didn't feel this, but I felt oftentimes that they understood that was what needed to be done. They weren't necessarily happy with it, but they seemed to understand. There was plenty of other places for them to go, and so this was just a small little spot. I don't know. There's been times where I was out cutting the kudzu, and the negative vibration was so high I had to stop. As a matter of fact, if you asked Mrs. Cog, I'd come in sometimes after a couple hours, and I'd say, "I just got to stop. I can't do this anymore because the kudzu's screaming at me."
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny. I, there were days when I felt that it felt okay with what I was doing, and there were other days when I felt it wasn't okay. And of course, it's all one living organization. It may be different vines and different trees, but it's all interconnected. So I was actually wondering if I was affecting their response. If I was, there were times when I would go out there and I'd be more centered with what I was doing. And it seemed that when I was more centered, the kudzu was more centered. And there were other times when I was like, oh, I don't really want to be doing this. And that seems to me that were the times when they were most upset. So maybe there's a third choice here, you know? Maybe
Well,
they are there because I'm here. Just like I say to people, we are the cause of this. We're causing these issues. We are getting, I'm not going to say we're getting the politician and empire that we deserve, but we're actually getting what we want. If we
yes,
didn't want it, we wouldn't have it.
yes, and I believe in that interconnectedness and
Hmm.
have experienced that, and that's actually an excellent point, that when you went out and you were centered and it flowed and it felt okay, and then when the days that you didn't want to do it, that's something for me to ponder more. Very interesting.
Yeah,
Like a
it's funny.
boomerang energetic effect, right?
Yes, and it just occurred to me now thinking about it, that there was that connection, which means that we, as creators of this reality, determine how the rest of the reality is dealing with it. If we're all living creatures, we're all energy in different forms, and so why would we possibly think that we would not affect anything else that we're interacting with?
Yes, and that is an entire discussion in of itself,
Hmm.
and a very interesting one, and maybe we'll explore that further another time. I'd like that. I would like to ask you though, you've written so many fantastic articles, and there was one in particular of avalanches and tipping points. You implore the reader to remain on duty and continue to apply pressure, that we ignore the call to stand down and to be blood sated. And so I'm wondering, are we capable of becoming powerful en masse, or are the little victories bestowed by the empire, or seemingly bestowed by the empire, simply placating the masses? And what are your thoughts on what we resist persists, and being in a state of allowing versus just believing? And that may tie into your screen door philosophy as well.
Yeah. Well, I, it really depends on how you approach this. We are already powerful. We just don't recognize our power. So it's not a matter of the government taking power from us, or the empire, or whatever it is that we're talking about. It is not a matter of them taking our power. It is a matter of them tricking us into giving them what we already have. And that is an important difference for us to understand. It's the difference between the victim mentality and the empowered mentality. And what I was trying to say there, and there's times when I do contradict myself, but what I was trying to convey was that recognize that you need to continue to do the digging here, that you don't want that, you should not allow that outside force to intimidate you and to continue to stop the digging, to start the awakening, to assume that simply you made one little victory here and, oh, we're all done. No, no, this is a process. This is not a destination. This is a journey. At least that's what I thought I was trying to convey there. But God, there are times when I'll go back and read something that I wrote 2 or 3 years ago and say, my thinking has evolved here. That's not necessarily how I feel anymore. So,
Sure. Okay. And to follow up on that, and just some thoughts that I've had rattling around is, being very aware of what's going on in our reality, and that there are very doomy scenarios, and, you get the doom and gloom blogs and the horrible news, and for me, and I'm wondering how you feel about this, walking a fine line of being very aware of what's going on, but not putting a lot of energy and focus into it to manifest it further or to perpetuate more of that. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah. Um, when do we when do we know enough to know that everything else is just um, minutia, distraction?
Yes.
Everybody goes through this process when we're waking up. It's that I use the term with Mrs. Cog when I say proximity. When we first start to awaken, um, everything is so close and so near and so raw, that we are almost in a panic, if not in an outright fight or flight reaction. The proximity of the danger seems so close, and it's almost like we're waking up, and so we're coming up on the radar. Bloop, our transponder has just been turned on, and the evil empire sees us out there, whereas before we were comfortably hidden in the mass. And there might be some truth to that. It depends on how, where the discussion goes with energy, and don't want to go into that. It's a whole nother discussion, as you like to say. The it just really depends upon your point of view as to how you're going to approach it.
Okay. I just was curious on your thoughts. Thank you.
Well, it's sorry if I'm stumbling here. I'm not sure myself. Let's be straight up. I'm not sure myself. This is an area that I still have more work to do. So if I sound uncertain, it's because I am.
Well, that makes two of us.
Yeah, and it's okay. Again, our society lies to us by telling us that you must be certain, and that certainty is the sign of strength and wisdom and knowledge and bullcrap. No, it's okay to not know.
Yeah, I read something along those lines the other day, like to be certain is an absurd state to be in, and I thought, yeah, I would agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to pluck another quote out of one of your articles from your early days, just because it had a little bit of resonance with me, and I'm curious where your thoughts are now. And it's from "Where have all the zero hedge veterans gone? Long time passing." And
Mm.
I'll quote you: "It was our pain that led us to seek truth, and it was our pain we wish removed by spreading the truth. And while we expressed the desire to make the world better, it was ultimately for our own benefit that we wished it rebuilt. A wise man once told me that what's important in life isn't so much that you're on the correct path, but rather if deep down inside you there's a desire to be on the correct path. And of course, once the student is ready, the teacher will always appear. The search for answers always begins within." And we've been
Mm.
speaking to a lot of that today. And the introspection seems to advocate not doing something for the masses, but simply for ourselves. And it to say that regardless of what's going on in the main, we simply follow our own and possibly solitary path. Do you find that as you move along in your musings and your experiences with life that we just change ourselves and then we have an impact on the world? What do you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, the plane is going down. The oxygen masks fall out from above the overhead bins. You need to put yours on first before you turn to your children to the left and to the right. Because if you try to apply it to the child to the right and then you pass out, what about the child to the left? In other words, you need to be healthy first before you can do anything to help others become healthy. Now, that sounds selfish, but let's go back to the analogy of a person beginning to wake up and I'll put my hand right up. I started doing this when I started to wake myself, running around like a chicken without its head, screaming and yelling, wake up." And how much damage are we doing when we do this, as opposed to taking a more measured, careful approach and recognizing that there are some people we are not going to wake, that we may not be able to wake any, and that the first goal is to heal ourselves before we can possibly even have a chance of healing each other. And my experience is that this is correct, that as I continue to heal, my inner energy is stronger than it was before. I touch more people, I have more impact. Um, and that's why I speak in that manner.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. And again, from another writing that you had posted, and it was the concluding statement that I wanted to address in your article, Remembering to Remember, and I found it
Mm,
quite profound. And you said, the game is rigged, folks, not just the markets or the economy, but everything artificial we interact with on a daily basis. As long as we ignore this fundamental fact, this supreme truth, nothing substantial will ever change because we enabled and supported the rigging. Our individual sovereignty can only be applied to free ourselves when it is released from within, not applied externally by the keepers of the false reality myth. And we do this by searching within so that we can begin the remembering to remember. And that just struck me so deeply. And I ask this question a lot of others, and I never really get an answer, and that's okay. But do you feel that there is anything in our reality that is not manipulated?
um, uh, okay, we need to look at this from. Uh, I don't know if the question is valid,
Okay.
and let me. Not saying it can't be answered, but we we are all influencing our realities. As a matter of fact, part of the awakening process is recognizing that there is more than just one reality. We are all influencing at the same time. So if we are all influencing, whether it's through a directed manipulation or an awakening manipulation, we are all affecting our reality. So I am manipulating the reality by being cognitive dissonance and having a website and posting on Zero Hedge. Am I not manipulating? I think it's the word that is disturbing to people, the definition of manipulation, because it has a negative connotation. But isn't the fact that we are all in this world, we are all energies in this world, some are brighter or more energetic than others, but we are all affecting this reality. We're all creating this reality at the same time. What could not be manipulated? I mean, I don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah,
I
it does. It does. And you took a different stance on it, which is also very interesting. And I guess when I had thought about this, or when I actually posed the question, I guess it's coming from an awakening standpoint when
hmm
people are released from their own slumber and they start looking at the government or the wars or the economic landscape or the food that they didn't realize was, tainted, or if they even get into the chemtrails and all that, you start to think, wow, is anything I've been told true?
And define what true is, or define
Exactly.
truth.
Exactly.
You know, truth is based upon a set of parameters or premises that we believe or accept, either individually or as a collective, is correct at this particular moment. But isn't the whole part of the process of awakening not just recognizing that what you believed before or thought was true before is incorrect, but as you continue to awaken, and there, as far as I'm concerned, it's a process, not a destination, not a place where I can wake up in 5 years and say I'm here, you know.
Right.
So,
Yes.
aren't we continuing to find that things that we thought were truth 2 or 3 years ago may have a second, third, fourth, or fifth layer, or that my mental or emotional perspective has colored what I thought was the truth before? I've actually found that some of the things in the matrix is the truth. It's like the tool analogy. The tool is neither good or nor bad. It's not correct or incorrect. It's how it's used and the intent. That's one of the words that I like to use all the time when talking with Mrs. Cog. It's not so much what is being done, but what's the intent behind the action. That is what is so important here. And so if I use the hammer to build a place to live, then was the hammer good? And if I take the hammer out and bash somebody over the head and rob them, does that make the hammer bad? And the answer, of course, when you look at it from that point of view, is no. It's neither good nor bad. It was the intent, which in this case is the user, that that determines whether something is quote good or quote bad. And this is why I think I have enough material to continue writing for a couple more weeks. There's still a lot of unanswered questions.
Well, yes, that topic right there, good, bad, right, wrong, black, white, that you could write on that for quite a while.
Yeah, and that is how, again, I don't want to get into the victim mentality of saying that it's them. They are simply enabling me to confine myself. But when we start thinking in terms of the duality, the right or wrong, good or bad, correct or incorrect, we're still confined. How have we liberated ourselves if we simply say, well, that's bad and this is good? How have we liberated ourselves? If we take the high road by saying, well, I'm good now, really? Do you think that person over there who you're calling bad, do you really think they think themselves as bad? And the answer is no. So if they think themselves good and they're doing quote unquote bad, what does that make you? Because they see you as bad. So what is
Yes.
bad? What is good?
Yeah, absolutely. And the labels that we wrap ourselves in, they become very interesting when we start to shed them and our perspectives change. It's, whenever I get a little big for my britches and I'm brought down to size, those are my best moments. And I learn so much from those.
Yeah, my disappointment with myself, and it's something that I constantly have to find perspective and centering in, is that I have to relearn this continuously. Well, come on, can it stick?
Yes.
Hello,
Yeah, I
is
agree.
anybody home?
It'd be nice if it stuck earlier.
Well,
You know,
what we
go-
don't see is that we're trying to undo decades, no, millennium of conditioning. It is so powerful, so all-encompassing. Uh, Here's an example. This is one of the reasons why I use the word insane asylum. If you if they allowed pregnant mothers to have children born in the insane asylum, let's say someone is in an insane asylum, they have a child, the child is born, and it grows up in the insane asylum, and that is the only thing that the child knows. How is that child going to know that there's anything different than that perspective?
oh,
How?
absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you.
So aren't we are all in this world. All we know, all we define ourselves by is what we are, what we perceive in this world. The only way we're going to work ourselves out of this insane asylum is to start asking better questions, which means we can't take anything for granted. One of the things, sorry, I'm rambling here, but one of the things that I like to point out that happened to me, let's put it this way, I'll make it personal. What do you do when you wake up and you realize that there's lies everywhere, that nothing that you think you know you can believe? where do you start to unravel that? How do you even gain your bearings? You can't travel to Timbuktu unless you know where you are now. So where do you begin the process of unraveling? What do you trust enough to start building a foundation at which you then continue to learn? How do you begin this process? Well, the only way that you can do it is to believe nothing, which is the impetus behind my Question Everything, Believe Nothing articles, the two-part series that I just wrote. To the person confined into this insanity, to believe nothing is impossible. You've got to believe something. Well, they're taking it literally. What and Neil Kramer says it so wonderfully when he says, think of you're carrying a backpack with your beliefs in it, and considering how heavy that backpack becomes when you've got a lifetime's worth of beliefs back there. I mean, and how constricted you are by those beliefs. So the way to work yourself out of that wilderness of not knowing what's up or down is to just abandon these things. That doesn't mean you have to not use them when you need them, but it's simply not carry them around as if that is what identifies you. In other words, don't allow the beliefs to identify you as yourself. Once you start to offload that garbage, you start to find the true meanings. The only place that you can look if everything on the external is a lie is you have to look within. I used to drive Mrs. Cog crazy when she would ask me questions. I'd say, look within. What kind of answer is that? She would say. What do you mean look within? Look where? What am I looking
Right.
for? Look.
Yeah,
But
and
anyway,
yeah, and to further that point a little bit, the societal beliefs, the socially acceptable and politically correct beliefs that we mask ourselves with when we're out in public, and until you have the confidence to let them go and just be and be comfortable in exploring that. The generational beliefs are even harder to let go of, because it's one thing to walk out your door and have people think you're a little nuts or not agree with you, but it's one thing to be within family
yeah.
and for them to watch you go through this process, and that's normally your safe haven. In some cases, absolutely not. But the generational beliefs and the indoctrination through those generations are even tougher, in my opinion.
No, I agree. Our indoctrination does not start with the empire. Our indoctrination starts with mom and dad, and their indoctrination started with their moms and their dads. So the most insidious nature of this conditioning is that it comes from the one source that as you as an infant can only trust because you have no other means at which to gather information or even take care of yourself. That one source, the ultimate truth, and let's use that, the ultimate truth from the perspective of the child, is themselves a propaganda disseminator. I mean, it's
Yes.
so insidious. It's so horrible if you think about it.
Yes. And yeah, that could be another whole topic.
Well, that's something that I confronted in a very real, personal manner when I alluded to earlier in this conversation that I'd had a difficult childhood, and to be a little bit more specific, grew up in an abusive family. My father was a raging alcoholic, and an abusive physically, mentally, emotionally, as all good alcoholics are. Um, the damage that was done was absolutely incredible. But I was being imprinted with this, that this was the world that I knew. All families were this dysfunctional. They obviously had to because mine is.
Right.
This perspective is insanity itself. But when you know nothing else, how do you pull yourself out of that? Um, of course, I'm going to internalize it. Of course, I'm going to make it my own, and I'm going to live it out. I mean, why do we make the same mistakes that we continue to make? Well, we haven't learned from them. I mean, that's the easy answer. But sometimes we have to play out this insanity to make it real. Uh, Neil Kramer does a much better explanation of this than I could ever possibly go. He was just talking about this a couple of months ago, but we play it out, we act it out, in order to make it real, to internalize it. And it's just, we could talk about this for hours.
Yeah, and I had read something, and I forget the source. It'll come to me in a moment, but and it really resonated with me. And basically, they had said that we create dramas and we bring our pain to the surface so that it can be seen, and
Hmm.
it keeps coming up over and over again because we haven't worked through it. And I found that to be a really profound
Profound.
statement. Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
and
absolutely. When you run into somebody who's constantly involved in drama, you recognize that they're the super magnet in the middle. They're attracting, not even they
yes.
attracting, they're creating it. They are creating. They'll swear to God they're not, but they
Right.
are.
And you probably know from doing your own internal work and experiencing all of this yourself that you can see it very quickly in someone that is doing that even though they don't realize they're doing it.
Yeah, and the last person we see it in is ourselves. It's
Yes.
well, we create this image of ourselves to protect ourselves. This is the ego, you know. We decide that this is an area that we do not want to go in, and we then empower our ego to protect ourselves from ostensibly ourselves. At least that's the thinking.
Yes, I agree. Ego is something else, very powerful.
Yeah, yeah. Again, the way to deal with any of these things is to become that screen door and to simply to not deny it. So we cannot deny that this is a powerful effect on us. It may ultimately not be real once we disarm it, but while it is armed by us, we have to acknowledge that it is there. I talk about this in a roundabout way when I speak about we are only as sick as our dirtiest, darkest secrets. The things that we will not talk about, we empower. The insanity is what we do not talk about. Thus, we empower it. And this is one of the reasons why I speak about the things I do, because I don't find anybody else talking about this stuff. And this is the sick stuff, folks.
Yes.
It
Yeah,
is.
I read that article and it I was starting to like fidget a little bit like, yeah, yeah, he's right. And I had to stop and think about, gosh, what are my dark secrets? And it is uncomfortable to face that. And not that there's anything earth shattering, because usually our own secrets are just blown up in our own minds and they're bigger than the reality outside of us. And but to the next person, if they were to share your secrets, you'd be like, oh, okay, you would choose your own every time is what I've heard. But they don't seem as big once you start talking about them. Like, oh really? Yeah, I understand, I've been there, I've done that kind of attitude.
We disempower it by talking about it,
Yes.
by acknowledging it. It is only as big as it is because we do not talk about it. The tagline that I put under my latest article is, "One must build the walls of our own cage higher than we are willing to climb if we are to remain safely confined within our own mind." In other words, we are our own worst enemy. That it is obvious that we do this, but to actually tear down those walls, it's one thing to acknowledge it, and that's a big step in and of itself to acknowledge it. But then to actually start tearing it down means you've got to tear apart yourself and reassemble. That's the work. That's the work. If you're feeling pain, then you're getting at it. So if you're not feeling any pain, you're not doing any work.
A lot of Jungian overtones there.
Is that what it is?
I'm thinking, yes, because he talks about, working with your shadow side and dealing with those issues that crop up, and that's what it reminds me of, yes.
Yeah, I
Although
don't
I'm
see.
not a student of Jung's, but I've listened to enough or read enough that I get the gist of it.
I am severely disadvantaged in some ways and actually quite liberated in others. I am severely disadvantaged because I do not spend and have not spent any time reading the great philosophers, the great thinkers. I run across into them every now and then when I'm reading an article and someone will quote this person or that, or lay out a thought train and then say, well, this comes from this person or that. But I don't want that because, and I say this often and I infuriate people probably because of the term I use and their interpretation of the term. But ultimately, we are all propagandists. We all phrase, write, or convey our thoughts, our meanings in the best possible light. We do it oftentimes without even thinking. We'll diminish any arguments that are against our position. We will make ours, emphasize our position to the best possible light. And everybody does it, and particularly people who are trying to prove their point or simply writing a book. They're not going to. Who has the guts, the inner courage to not only make an argument but then dismantle the argument?
Right.
Okay, that's one of the things that I do in my writing is that I will show the flaws in my thinking. I will say, and the proof is I don't do what I'm saying we should be doing here. That's the
Right.
ultimate flaw. It makes it real. So I don't want to be polluted with. I say the word polluted, and that's a strong term. I find that when I'm reading someone, I often find myself agreeing with the person, and then I'll read somebody else who's writing the counter argument, and I'll find myself agreeing with that person.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and I'll say to myself, wait a minute, they can't both be right. Well, maybe they could, but the fact that I am eagerly drinking that person's writings means that I am suspending disbelief. Okay. And
Right.
I need to not suspend disbelief. I have to question everything. So I don't want to read heavily into these. People say it all the time in the comment section. Oh, this person, you should read this person, or that sounds like you've been reading this person. And I feel like an absolute idiot when I say, no, I don't know who you're talking about.
The same thing happens to me. I have not studied the great philosophers, and I'll come across something and read a quote, and something will align with how I'm feeling at the moment or thinking at the
Hmm.
moment. But like you've said before, it's a constant journey, and the evolution of this path is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Well, if I read somebody and I absolutely positively agree with them, then I feel that I've lost my mind to them.
Hmm.
Um, and the again, some of this thinking comes from that analogy I gave to you, where I left my life in tatters behind me, and where do you go from there? Well, you look within. I think that the only truth that we can really find is within, and anything that's external, including cognitive dissonance, okay, is in some respects a false reality. Don't believe what I'm telling you. Just use what I'm telling you as a catalyst to find your own truth. Don't believe me. Find your own, you know?
Right.
Just
Yes.
use me as a catalyst.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well,
And you touched on this just briefly a few moments ago, and about, you'll go back and read past articles and how your thoughts have changed. And how would you say your thoughts and views have evolved in the 4+5+ years of your dissertations on zero hedge? What have you noticed about yourself?
mm, the well, as I say, it's a constant learning process, and so to go back to that analogy of the backpack and the beliefs, and to discard one and pick up another one, or just discard one and never pick up another one similar to that because you no longer need it. The process of learning is sort of like building blocks. You put a couple on the bottom, and those act as a foundation. And every now and then, you've got to go back and recognize that you put in some poor blocks there. This may have worked for you at the time, and it may have gotten you up to the next 2 or 3 steps. But there are times when you will find, if you continue to question everything, that you will find that you've got to go back and rearrange some of those blocks, pull them out, repair them, whatever it may be. And that's okay. It's not a matter of it, it, some people, the only way that they identify themselves is by what they know. I identify myself by what I don't know. And the great thing is I don't know what I don't know. you know, I have
Right.
no idea. I have no idea what I don't know. So it's okay if I don't know. I don't have to have my ego, well, I certainly love to have my ego brushed a little bit now and then, but I don't have to have it in order to be okay with myself. It's a difficult You'll find people who have been educated as engineers and scientists and whatnot who are told that certain things are absolute. Those are the people that are very difficult at times. They have a very difficult time dealing with the idea of not having beliefs. There's some things that are just true. Well,
Right.
no.
Okay. Yeah. When I hear somebody state the absolute truth,
Mm.
I have to stop and think, wow, the their journey to the truth may actually be very surprising because I've yet to find it. I have my own personal truths that work in the moment or in a given situation, but like you said, the more I know, the less I know.
Well, by accepting somebody else's truth, you're empowering them and
Mm-hmm.
disempowering yourself. And
Yes.
again, that's part of the process of an authority. An authority, if you break that word apart, authority, what you're doing is they are authoring their own justification and rationalization for accepting, stealing, conniving, whatever, your
Mm-hmm.
power. Okay? And so by accepting that there are absolute truths and the only place to find them is over there, you are disempowering your own ability, not necessarily to create a truth, but to find it. It's within, it's there. I know it's there. It's the one thing I do know is that the answers are within. Every time I go looking for them, I find them. And every time I go looking externally, I can become very confused.
Right.
So what does it? What does that tell us?
Yes. To be within.
It's difficult because we're surrounded by a society that tells us just the opposite. And
Mm-hmm.
where I find it most fascinating is that there are ways in which we are ingrained and conditioned into these things that we don't even, it's so natural for us to have these thinkings, this conditioning. We never question it. We just, why would we question? It's it's like this. We understand that atoms have lots of space between them, okay? But we believe that that chair we're going to sit in right now is solid. It doesn't even enter our mind that that chair is not solid. So that absolute certainty that we believe that that chair is solid, we have that same certainty about certain things that we have been conditioned to believe. We wouldn't even know to question them unless we start questioning everything. That's why you have to question everything. You don't know what the basis is, the premise is behind them. You must question everything in order to begin to start finding some answers. Otherwise, you asked me earlier, is everything manipulated? Yeah. The facade is wonderfully seamless. It is real as far as we're concerned because we've been taught to believe that that is real. The only way we're going to see through that facade is by asking the basic premise, by the questions, by questioning its very premise. And for people who are caught up in the here and now, in the reality of this reality, they can't without sacrificing themselves, without destroying themselves, because that's all that they identify themselves with, that reality. It's this is why you have to be careful when you start deconstructing yourself, that you don't do it all at once, or you will implode. You will
Yes.
lose your basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will agree with you on that. Cog, I'm gonna move completely away from all the topics of consciousness and ego and all those wonderful things that I love having in-depth conversations about, and move to the financial system because I do think it ties in here a little bit. And given that you have a financial background, I wanted to discuss your thoughts about the authenticity of the financial system as a whole. And, being a zero hedge contributor, there's a lot of information on there. And in your opinion, or in your moving through the financial system yourself, are there aspects of the system that are authentic and it's not truly all doom and gloom?
Well, you mean as it is currently constructed?
Yes.
It's all fake.
Wonderful.
Next question.
Yeah.
Um, God, I tried to approach this and realized after I had written the article, essentially, I'm calling it the money meme, the meme, meme, that I didn't even begin to scratch the surface. The financial system is an artificial construct. It is an alternative reality that is the basis for much of the reality that we think is real, okay? The money meme is a mind virus. It is a implant. It ties everything together. It creates the reality that we are presented with in such a seamless manner that we don't even question the fact that we must pay to exist in an environment that we are the natural beings of. I mean, it's just, if you begin to take it along that line, you realize how absolutely brilliant, brilliant it is as a control mechanism. And that's what it is. It is a control mechanism. So if it is artificially created to control, what is real about it? In my opinion, is nothing. But because we believe it is real, because we empower it with our belief, and that is the energy that supports it, because we believe it's real, it is for all practical purposes real. So to question the system means that you have to go back and start asking some deeper questions about that. And for most people, that's too difficult. When people tell us that, you see it on Zero Hedge often, people say, "I'll just let the system collapse." Oh, really? Okay, I agree that it must collapse because we have to get out of this alternative reality and find some. I don't know what we want to find. We need to find something other than what we have. But do you recognize that the emotional trauma that's going to happen, that's going to be inflicted, that we will inflict upon ourselves when we look into the abyss and we find nothing looking back? Um, you see it yourself in Zero Hedge when you'll see people in the comments section deconstructing right in front of us. Oh my God, this is all crazy. This is nothing what I thought it was. These are poor souls. We need to help these people. We need to teach them how to help themselves.
You
I'm
know, and
sorry, I got off the question. I
oh no, that's okay.
apologize.
No, that's quite all right. I it's a free flowing conversation, and that works for me. When we were talking about the aspects of the system that are authentic, and people that are wishing for a total collapse and bring it on, and they think they're ready, and I've had moments of that myself, like just because I'd like to move forward, or I've had the thoughts that okay, I'm ready too, but ultimately, like what you say, you look back at it and like, oh really, is that the best possible scenario? And it may very well collapse. And but at the same time, I often ponder if the solutions to such an enormous situation like a collapse, and I probably couldn't even put my mind around it at this point, are they even in the collective consciousness yet? Because many people still live in the left-right paradigm and in the money paradigm, and I don't know what could possibly take its place that we would feel safe.
No, and to replace something that is currently here with something that is not of the same basic construct means that we must change ourselves.
Yes.
How much changing do you see out there, to be honest with you? What people are really asking or saying when they say they hope the system collapse is that they're hoping that enough pain will be inflicted upon people that they will seek alternative answers or they'll start asking better questions. But we all know that when we're in pain, the first thing that we seek is the relief of the pain. And anybody who's going to relieve the pain, because we haven't taught ourselves how to relieve our own pain, then we're going to look for somebody else too. And this is how this system has gone on for thousands of years. This is not the first time, nor will it be the last time that the financial system or the meme that's holding the society together is collapsed or collapses on its own, and another one is rushed out and replaces it. I mean, end the games, restart, and people will applaud it. Yes, let my life be something like what it was before. The other thing is that people engage in the comforting wisdom, the comforting belief that they somehow will get through this something close to where they are now, that the electricity will magically still stay on, that the just-in-time deliveries will somehow make it to them, or that they have enough food in the bunker to last until the new world order either reconstructs one or everybody becomes enlightened, which we both know won't happen. So is anything real? No. But because people believe it's real, it is the functional equivalent, and thus that's the reason why it continues to lumber forward and destroy more lives, and will continue to do so. I wrote something about this when I wrote perhaps a crumble rather than a collapse. You know,
Hmm.
if you watch something crumble, if you watch something collapse, it's not just a whoosh down into the ground. Pieces fall off, and then there's bigger pieces that collapse down, and then there's some more stability brought into the system for a little while, and actually might come back a little bit as people scream, "I'll do anything to stop the pain." So it's a crumble rather than a collapse.
And would you say that we're watching the crumbling as we speak?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just we have a continuity bias, and we'll do anything to keep it going.
And given that the system is unauthentic or fake, are there necessities of the financial system, since we see it as real and this construct is real, such as debit cards and bank accounts, retirement and savings accounts, because they do serve a purpose for us in this fake construct?
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, I want my cake and eat it too,
Right.
please. You know,
Yes. Pretty please. Yes.
yeah. I mean, as Mrs. Cog said the other day, you know what, hon? I really do want my debit card to continue to work. You know, I
Right.
do want to be able to go to the store and plop down that piece of plastic. And so, in some respects, we're kidding ourselves when we say, um, by withdrawing, we're weakening the system. But we're not, because ultimately the system is leveraging the leverage, which was leveraging the leverage. It is becoming more and more unstable, which means it's on the margins, and it only takes, whereas 20 years ago, it might have taken a 20% of the population to defect in order for the system to drop. Collapse or settle into a lower energy state. Now it's only going to take 2%. And in a couple of years, it'll take 1%. As it becomes more unstable, it takes less energy to completely destabilize it. The question is, are you ready for what's coming? Be careful
Mm,
what you wish for, you know?
right. Yes. And, my question for you regarding that is, for me, I am an observer of the crumbling and also an active participant because, much like Mrs. Cog, I appreciate that I can make hotel reservations on my debit card and I can go to the grocery and still get what I need. And I like those luxuries. But to what extent have you disentangled yourself from that? Or have you even
Well,
wanted to disentangle from?
well, as we say when you go to the website twoiceflows.com, up in the upper right-hand corner is welcome to Two Ice Flows. Please read first. And what we're really doing is a mission statement. We're talking about this. We do not we're not preppers. We're simply trying to pull back a bit. We're trying to focus more on ourselves. What we're doing is slowly but surely pulling back and hoping that and hoping, and this is the honest word, hoping that as we pull back, we'll find where else to take if this will take us. In other words, we're not sitting here saying this is the route and we're going to take it. What we're saying is we're going to try to do something different here, and with the hope and I'm just going to use the word hope, with the hope that as we continue down the path, the direction will continue to open up for us. What that does that entail in specifically? Well, I am no longer in the financial field. I've gotten out. I had enough. Don't want any more. Exit stage right. We're, of the assets that we do have, almost all of the assets that we had in the old world were attached to debt, and we're extinguishing it, which means in most cases we're selling assets to pay off the debt. And if there's anything left over, great. And if there isn't, well, okay. But we don't want the encumbrances um, that come with living in the insanity and the matrix and the Ponzi. Ironically, and this is what's so funny about it, because we're selling assets, people have to buy it, and which means they actually have to take on more debt than we're extinguishing. So by us backing out of the system, we're actually enabling the system.
Wow, that's an interesting concept.
But nobody thinks it from that point of view. But
Right.
by by backing out in this way, by, for instance, people say, "Oh, I sold my businesses and I sold this, and I've just got a little cabin out somewhere." For them, they have withdrawn, they have minimized their interactions with the empire, but by doing that, they actually fed the empire. It is when you take it that much further, you're saying, well, how much good did I actually create here?
Right. Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it
Because
is. It
I
is.
do hear people speak to that quite a bit. Like, they're going to sell out and go live on a grid and solar power and get completely disentangled from the
Mm.
matrix. And so to think that they're actually perpetuating or empowering it is interesting.
Well, we should clarify this just a little bit.
Okay.
The initial movement out is feeding the empire, but we're essentially removing some or all of the leeches, and so eventually the leeches begin to die. Because longer term, we are disentangling to a certain degree, but we are not trying to. I mean, how am I supposed to discuss this insanity? Um, I have to have internet connection. I have to have electricity. I have to have
Yeah.
access. So exactly how do I do this and live in that little cabin in Montana with no electricity?
Right.
It's a contradiction. You know what? We just existing in this insanity brings out the hypocrisy in all of us. The question is, do we even recognize it or not?
Right.
I mean, I'm at least acknowledging that it is here, and as I find another one little mold popping his head out, I'll try to knock it back in as best I can. But I have no answers. I just have better questions.
And, if resistance is futile, and I'm not entirely sure that's what you're saying, then is the key to simply minimize the interaction?
Yeah, that's it. Again, it comes down to that airplane analogy where the oxygen masks fall from the overhead bins. You must put yours on first. We all have internal damage. We must begin the process of healing before we can even begin to think that we could have the capacity to help somebody else heal. Now, from certain measures, that appears to be extremely selfish. But if I'm going to die in the middle of the operation on you, then what good did I bring you? Because now we both are dead. Okay, let me heal. Let me raise my energy level to the point where I can do good as opposed to just do more damage. Seen from that point of view, it's not so bad that I have to put the oxygen mask on first.
Wonderful. Cog, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you, and I hope that you will consider coming back to Time Monk Radio to explore more of your writings and your thought processes and share them with our listeners.
Yeah, I would be very, very excited to do this again. It's a coming out process for cognitive dissonance. For the longest time, he and I had a very personal relationship. Then I started sharing him. I gave him an identification and empowered him, and started sharing cognitive dissonance with the world through Zero Hedge. And now this is the next step. I've actually voiced cognitive dissonance. I've It's not just the articles or the comments. It's now you've heard the voice of cognitive dissonance. You understand more about what is behind cognitive dissonance. It is now more than just what you have imagined and it's scary. I mean, the little 5-year-old is peeking his head out from underneath the bed and saying, "I'm here. Don't beat me up too much."
Well, we are honored to share this process with you, and you are welcome to join us here at Time Monk Radio at any time.
Appreciate that. Maybe we can get Mrs. Cog to peek out with me next time.
I'll let you work on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Cognitive Dissonance on Time Monk Radio. You can learn more about cognitive dissonance at zerohedge.com and 2iceflows.com.